Hello, welcome to the Evolution Sports Podcast, Volume 3, Part 2. I'm your host, Andrew Ferraro. This is my co-host, Dave Sanders. We're going to continue discussing our learnings through 3 weeks here in the NFL. Before we get back into that, I just want to say, if you haven't, please take a moment, do some donations for Hurricane Florence relief. Whatever you've got, whether it be time, cash, items, things that are desperately needed. I live in a directly impacted area. I can tell you about the devastation firsthand. So this is me pleading with you that if you've got a few extra bucks, something laying around the house that you know, hey, you can donate, go to a good cause, please do. The floodwaters may have started to recede. It is not raining, but the devastation will be here for quite a while. I'm sure if you know folks that lived through Harvey out in Houston, through Katrina, Sandy, those things, it is not a simple, hey, it's been 2 weeks, you guys are good, have a good day. So please, if you got some time, money, items, whatever it may be, please think about donating. So we talked about great performances, not so great performances. Let's kind of kick into the rookies. QBs were all the rage coming out. This was supposed to be one of those great QB classes, plus Saquon Barkley, a lot of potentially franchise changers. First one, you can't talk about franchise changers and terrible franchises without talking about the Jets. So let's kind of start with Darnold. Dave, why don't you give us a breakdown here on my man Darnold?
Sure. So, the first week was great. The Lions game, they dominated, and a lot of that was, big throws by Darnold, but also some big plays by the defense that inflated that score a bit and maybe got the hype start with him a bit sooner than it should have. But all that said, through 3 games, I think he's been kind of what we should have expected. He's got a ton of talent. He's been one of the top-rated recruits coming out of high school, and throughout college, he was always thought of as an early first-round pick. He does, he's very turnover happy, especially in those last few years at USC, and I think that's translated a bit to the NFL. But it is early; it's 3 games. He doesn't have great weapons around him.
I can see that.
So I think
Darnold's probably my favorite
bad,
guy coming out. He had those turnover problems at SC. I think that was more him trying to force things. I don't know if the hype train got to him a little bit, where he said, "Hey, I got to really solidify my draft position," or what. Big arm. He's very cerebral. That is something I enjoy. I saw it a lot in the preseason. I feel like he made good strides week to week, and I think he will continue. Like you said, there's not much there on the Jets. Name a playmaker off the Jets, and I'll probably give you $20. That's what I thought. Didn't know any of them. So, when your best receiver is Quincy Enunwa, you're kind of going to struggle. I guess my big question, when you can't talk about Darnold without talking about the other team in New York, the Giants, who had picked 2, they went Barkley. Saquon is the All-American, All-Universe running back coming out of Penn State. Me personally, I think it's going to haunt the Giants long term. Could have had an opportunity to grab a franchise quarterback. They went running back instead. It just seemed like the wrong choice then. I still feel that way. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's how most of us think. Barkley's amazing. He comes in as one of the best running backs in football already. We kind of thought that from day one. He's also one of the most expensive running backs already. And in a league where the running back position continues to be devalued with both draft capital and free agency signings, it's an interesting move. And it's interesting for a number of reasons, because Eli is getting older. We're near the end with him. They've got Odell in his prime. They've got, Ingram and Shepard. They've got some weapons there now. And they're just not set up to, really contend right now. So you're wasting some of Barkley's best years on a team that's going to be, struggling to reach 500. It's not the move I would have made. They could have had their choice of any quarterback besides Baker. And I think they're probably going to regret that, because getting back up to that draft position to take one of these quarterbacks is probably going to require a trade at this point, where you're going to give up future assets to get back in there. So if I were a Giants fan, I'd be disappointed. I love Saquon. I think you definitely nailed that pick, but the value of a quarterback is just so much higher than a running back, and I think that's going to be a constant comparison for them, especially if 1 or 2 of these guys turn into cerebral franchise guys.
Oh, I totally agree. Big fan of Saquon, love him. I just think the Giants are going to have to waste a year of Saquon. They're going to have to waste a year of OBJ. You're going to have to start paying people because they're going to need a quarterback. Eli's old, doesn't look very good. especially week 2. He was just getting destroyed and gave the classic Eli looks. I think it's just going to haunt the Giants long term. Yep. So they had an opportunity here. You've seen a lot of gems in the running back market you can get later. Alvin Kamara comes to mind first off. So I think they missed the boat there. But let's switch over to you're probably one of your favorite guys in the draft, Josh Rosen.
Yeah, Rosen's been my favorite guy in a while, really. UCLA put up huge numbers. He was criticized a lot because their record wasn't great, especially in big games. But if you look back at some of those, they were scoring 40 points on good teams, and the defense was getting killed. He's not the most mobile, but I think he can make all the throws. He's been criticized some for being kind of like a smart ass with coaches and giving off some personality there. But I prefer to have my quarterback be more, too much on the bright side and challenging things than not putting in the work and not being as dedicated. So to me, he's the guy. I'm excited that he's getting his full start now, especially after the brief appearance last week. I think he'll open things up for David Johnson and help Larry Fitzgerald improve his season as well. I think let's move on to Baker, though. I think that was the big hype of last week, Thursday Night Football. We had Joe Buck and Aikman talking about it during the game. What are the chances he comes into this game? I didn't think it was very realistic. Tyrod goes down, and in comes Baker, and the rest is history. What do you think of that performance?
I mean, that's Baker being Baker. If anybody's kind of followed him through college, especially the last couple of years, I think he kind of got a bad rap as far as, planting the flag. Is he childish? I heard on the radio, it might have been Stephen A. talking about how he came out and the first thing he had was his phone. And what does that mean? It's the dumbest.
As if that matters.
Yeah. Oh, my God, he got his phone. Oh, he was checking his Twitter. Like, who gives a damn? The kid's, he's 23. Let him be what he's going to be. I probably wasn't on the Baker hype train pre-draft, but post-draft, and now after a week, I think we're going to really kind of see what he can do. I'm loading up the Baker Express. Cleveland might have found something to actually not have to buy a new jersey every year for a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He looks pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's set up best to succeed this year of all these guys. Rosen's got a poor offensive line in Arizona, but Baker's got a decent line. He's got good weapons, even without Josh Gordon. You've got Landry, Callaway, and Njoku, and then you've got 3 running backs who are all pretty solid. He looked really decisive in that game. That was my biggest takeaway, is that he came in and he was letting it rip. It looked like he belonged. It looked comfortable. He's played a lot of big games in college, so I guess that does make sense. And now with getting first-team reps all week and knowing he's the guy, I think they're going to be actually a pretty decent team, and we're going to see the Browns maybe get to 6 or 7 wins.
Yeah, I got a bet going with a guy at work. He said the Browns are going to make 500. I said not a chance. You had asked me a week ago, I would have told you I'm doing great on that bet. Now with the Baker train coming, I still don't think they make 500, but I think they're going to do better. And we couldn't talk Week 3 football without talking about Josh Allen hurdling people, leading the Bills, and coming from a 17-point underdog to beat the pants off the Vikings.
That was incredible. That was the biggest upset, I think, in 23 years. For a 16.5-point favorite to lose like that, it's just unprecedented.
Yeah, Josh looked good. Looked best I've seen him. My boss is a huge Bills fan, so I texted him through the game. Wouldn't know if he'd bought his Josh Allen jersey yet.
Right.
He had not, just in case anybody was wondering. But, I think he looks pretty good. He's looking good so far. I'll be curious to see how he backs it up. He's got the biggest arm. I just don't think he can hit the broadside of a barn.
He needs a lot of development there.
Yeah.
But he has a lot of the physical tools, though, so I can understand why he's a first-round pick. Guys like that usually don't fall till later just with that, set of skills. But he's going to need a lot of reps, a lot of work, and I think there's a chance that he becomes maybe the best in this class, but he also probably has the biggest chance of being a complete bust and washing out of the league in a couple of years.
I would 100% agree. He's either the ceiling's really big, but the floor is quite at the bottom. Yeah. So I guess if we kind of had to say, if you had to rank, what were your rankings to say, we'll add Allen, so the top 4 prior to the draft. What did you have him ranked as, Dave?
Yeah, I had Rosen number 1 by a good amount. Mayfield 2, and then there was a big drop from there. I would have gone Darnold. I would have actually put Lamar Jackson there, at 4, and then Josh Allen at 5. How about you?
I actually had Darnold up. I had Darnold probably at 1, Rosen at 1A. I didn't think you were going to go wrong either way there. I probably had a dip there, I guess, to Mayfield at 3. He's a little shorter. I feel like he played college forever. Just didn't quite know if the ceiling was going to be there. I felt like from a floor standpoint, he knew what he was doing, was going to be all right for you.
Sure.
Probably, like I said, probably Lamar at 4, even though I wasn't real high of his skill set translating well to the NFL. And I would have told you not to just let Josh Allen go undrafted. I thought pre-draft I considered him, a Ryan Mallett. I'm 7 feet tall. I can throw the ball a mile, make me a quarterback. Wasn't a big fan. But if I had to redo the rankings, I would probably go Mayfield 1. Then I would go probably Darnold and Rosen are both about the same still. Probably lean a little bit more Darnold because he's shown me some more, especially through the preseason. I felt like he got a lot better. I'd go Allen at 4 and then Lamar Jackson. I just don't see the situation. I don't see him being utilized right, and I think it's really going to hinder his development. I feel like he turns into a Tyrod Taylor.
So with these rookies, we're seeing them get into game action pretty early. Do you think sitting for a year can benefit a quarterback? Do you think it's best to get them out there week 1?
I think with where the NFL is, the changes in college, me personally, I don't see sitting doing a whole lot. You don't get the reps you need against the looks. A lot of it is seeing looks, depending on your quarterback. I think somebody that comes out of an offense that doesn't do anything but stare at the coach for the play and all the checks needs to sit. But I mean, the last rookie to sit for an entire season was Jake Locker in Tennessee.
Yeah, that's
Jake Locker doesn't have a locker anymore. He's not. I don't even think he's in the league. So he's not even in the league. So there are some success stories in Aaron Rodgers comes to mind, but you got to look at who Aaron Rodgers was behind. He was behind Brett Favre, and then they finally kicked Brett Favre out because they knew, hey, Aaron's got to play. I just don't see it. You see a lot of guys that do sit that maybe aren't first-round picks.
Start them as soon as possible. I think the off-season reps they can get, especially getting first-team reps from the beginning, can be really valuable. We've seen in recent years that Tom Savage held back Deshaun Watson for a few weeks. It was a complete disaster. Watson then came out at that point and lit it up. I think you're seeing with Mayfield coming in, sitting him for a game or two, I don't know what value's gained there. They're already playing in huge game environments in college. And getting those practice reps, first team reps all week seems to make a lot more sense to me than bringing somebody in mid-game like Mayfield and like Rosen did. I guess transitioning from there, we talked a lot about how important reps are. And a lot of these college schemes, the college scheme does play a big part, but so does how many reps they've gotten. So we kind of looked at some stats about guys who weren't in pro-style offenses but had a ton of reps. Baker Mayfield, 1,500 pass attempts in college, and Mahomes had 1,300. So I guess in my opinion, that plays a big role because they're coming in as pretty experienced quarterbacks. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, reps totally make a difference, but they got to be the right reps. We can, and we've got, and we'll make sure we tweet this out, is from Chris Brown talked about Mayfield. He was in five years in college across 2 different programs, started 48 games. So he saw 3,600 plays. So you saw 3,600 different defensive looks. And he played in while it's not NFL complex, still gave him a lot of responsibility to change plays, routes, blocking schemes, make the checks. I think being cerebral and having to make those checks is a huge advantage. So you flick to the flip end of that spectrum, somebody like a Chip Kelly. And this came straight from Jason Kelsey. Chip Kelly's offense contains zero ability for the quarterback to make an audible check, change plays, anything. And that was even in the NFL.
Yeah, that's really alarming.
So that's horrifying, actually, which can explain why the Chip Kelly experiment ended as poorly as it did.
Yeah, I mean,
for a Mayfield, him being able to get up to the line, make those calls, make those checks, you're only going to get those with reps. You're only going to get those with experiences. He's going to see different looks, see different schemes. I think back to probably the best at being making changes. Omaha himself, Peyton Manning, would call 2-3 plays in the huddle and then come up and maybe go to a third play just based on what he saw. I'm not saying Mayfield's got to do something like that, but reps make a difference. So being able to do those things and make those freedoms and know why you're doing it's going to be a big deal.
Completely agree, and love that we get this information on Twitter, which has become such a great resource for educating fans. There are so many great follows out there. We just mentioned Smart Football, Chris Brown. There are now film breakdowns from the recent years from Matt Waldman, Dan Orlovsky this year that really take fans, inside the game much deeper than you see on TV. It allows you to have, a 2-minute clip where the commentators breaking down exactly what they're seeing there from a scouting point of view, and it's helped me learn a lot, and it really has piqued my interest into certain nuances that we just don't, the usual sports fan doesn't think about. And even when the color analyst on the game breaks stuff down, it's usually not to that level. Who are some of your favorite follows on Twitter?
I have to say, Warren Sharp's got a good bit there at Sharp's Football. He's got his book. Evan Silva does some stuff. I call him Frisco Josh. That's his Twitter handle. But Josh has got some great stuff. I do a lot of his stuff. He does the air yards and things like that. But Orlovsky's become huge for me. Anytime I see he's got some posted, I end up listening to his breakdowns. It's really nice to see a former player be like, hey, here's what it is. Here's why this is important. He didn't just break it down and say, hey, look at a great throw by Mahomes here. He says, no, here's what he saw. Here's what the coverage is. Here's why that's good. And I think that's also what makes Tony Romo so much better as a color commentator than others is he gets excited, but he can also tell you what he's seeing and why.
Very true. It's just an education listening to Romo. First of all, he's got the passion. You can tell he just loves football, loves doing it. But it really is just it's so educational throughout the game that it's eye opening. That why haven't color analysts been doing this for a long time? Why are we still getting the same cliches from many of the guys? And one of my favorites, Phil Simms, comes to mind because he would just repeat the same phrases that we talked about this all week, and there just wasn't a whole lot of insight there. Not a whole lot that the viewers gaining. But Romo's been revolutionary. Besides just predicting plays, but really just providing insight into the thought processes of the quarterback, and then scheme wise that nobody else has really done.
Yeah, I think that's really what's going to be for whether it be NBC, Fox, CBS, ESPN, the NFL Network, whoever's broadcasting the game is getting the correct color analysts together. You talk about Joe Buck, Troy Aikman. They don't add anything to the game, in my opinion. Neither of those Chris Collinsworth, Phil Simms, those kind of guys. Yes, they've been doing it a while. I appreciate what they've given to the game while they are former players. They haven't played any time recently. The game has changed significantly from when they played and what they've seen. So it's just tough to relate to a guy, Troy Aikman, who hasn't played since the 90s. Talking about the passing schemes now and different formula, it's just 100% different. So having a Romo, Chris Carter was on a game this past week. I think he had the Saints-Falcons game, if I remember correctly. So getting some insight from him, that's a Hall of Fame receiver who's played recently. It's been a little bit more refreshing.
Jumping back to some of the stats that Warren Sharp has shared on Twitter, a lot of his data makes you rethink some of those norms that we thought for a long time in football, like on 3rd and 4th down near the goal line, you have to come out in a bunch formation, run the football. We saw that the Seahawks were criticized for this when they threw an interception in the Super Bowl, but he has so much data on this that actually shows that if you come out with multiple receivers in your formation, you have a much better success rate for both running and passing versus being in a bunch formation. This was especially notable, and he shared this a lot on Twitter during the Eagles-Falcons game when Sarkisian lined up in bunch formations repeatedly. They didn't work out. It's not to say they would never work out, but it seems like the data shows having 2 and 3 receivers makes a lot more sense. And that's a great insight that teams should be using. But it is just kind of eye-opening that this kind of data is out there, that trusting your eyes isn't the way you always have to go when we have years worth of data and tons of samples to look at. A lot of the data he gives you kind of makes you really rethink, just some of your old school norms of, hey, I need to line up 3rd and 1, we better run the ball, versus, spreading them out maybe a better bet statistically. Definitely. Another way that Twitter has helped, educate fans. I think we talked a little bit about Evan Silva and Scott Barrett, their Twitter handles, but I learned a lot about Tyrod Taylor just through reading a couple of their tweets. So Evan shared that Tyrod, around the time of his trade to Cleveland, that he really has to see receivers open before throwing. The receivers that he's thrown to over the last couple of years have the highest average yards of separation at the time of the reception or being thrown to. So at first glance, you'd think, okay, that's great. He's seeing the open guys and throwing it to him. He's recognizing that. But it also probably means that he's not throwing into tight windows, and he's waiting for that perfect opening. So that kind of gave me some pause there and made me rethink Tyrod a little bit, because those interception numbers are great. He doesn't turn the ball over, but if he's also not advancing the ball, that's a big problem. Scott Barrett hit on this recently when they played the Steelers, that they run zone coverage 80% of the time, and Tyrod thrives against that while he struggles against man. So I think that even takes it a bit further and makes sense, because he's seen those pockets in the zone, throwing it in there, and when it's in tight man coverage, he's not as comfortable. And that was kind of something I took into the season this year, and after watching him through 2.5 games, it was eye-opening to see. It just changed my viewpoint on it completely. You saw him hesitate a bunch of times, and he was more willing to take a sack than throw it into a tight window to Jarvis Landry or whoever it may be.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's really nice to see those things. You think, oh man, his receivers had the highest separation. It's great. But then you also kind of, if you look at just the straight stats of he had, and I'm just making up numbers here, he went 23 of 30 for, 250 yards, a touchdown, no picks. You're like, oh, okay, he had a solid game. Then you realize if he's a little more aggressive, yeah, he might have a pick, but he also might have some more, more yards, better sticks, drive the team to more wins. So yeah, if you're not following guys like Scott Barrett or Evan Silva, you really need to. They put out a lot of great information, not only just for the casual fan or the guy who wants to be a little bit more educated, but also, in terms of fantasy football. I'm really big into fantasy football, as we talked on the intro pod. I know Dave is as well. But the fantasy community was able to hit pay dirt this past week with Robert Woods. First 2 weeks hadn't done a whole lot. Dave, how did he look week 3? Yeah, lit it up. And the reason the fantasy community was able to kind of take pride in that one is, they used the analytics. How many snaps was he in? Was he getting opportunities? Was he running routes, or was he just out there blocking every time, he was in the game? And, if you're not looking at depth of air yards and air yards per attempt, it's an advanced stat. You really need to. It's out. It's really great metric. You can do a lot to predict wide receiver success and consistency. So you're big on Robert Woods. I mean, Goff lit him up. He's killing it. Woods had a great game. I think it's one of those. You'll keep seeing these things. You'll be able to see those guys who are underutilized.
So lastly, I wanted to finish up with one of our favorite guys, Pat McAfee. I was a big fan of his back at West Virginia. He punted for the Colts for a number of years, really successful there, Pro Bowler. And then he went on to go the comedy route. He was doing stand-up shows that were really successful. A lot of his content's out there on YouTube if you want to check it out. He went to Barstool for a while, and now is back doing his own podcast. Huge fan of his, and his Instagram and Twitter feeds on game day are amazing. He goes into very nuanced, detailed breakdowns of punting, kicking, holding, stuff you're not going to see elsewhere. Very entertaining, very funny. It's just really a great way to dive deeper on Sunday. Have you gotten to check those out?
Oh, For the Brand's huge, man. I'm a huge fan of what he does. I tend to like the smaller stuff, so the little nuances between kicking, holding, why is that important? He just brings a lot of passion to it, a lot of comedy. Just makes you really enjoy it. And he does slow breakdowns. Everybody remembers him and Marquise Lee used to go after each other on different celebrations.
Yeah,
see who would one-up each other. So it's really great for the league. Great to see him keep doing some great things. As we kind of wrap up here, do you got any final thoughts you want to add, Dave?
Just wanted to add something on to our last conversation, part 1. We were talking a lot about Andrew Luck and whether or not he, has diminished from his previous years. We did have some numbers. We'll share these out on Twitter and on Facebook, but that his, air yards, we talked about that a bit before. It calculates, how many yards they're throwing in the air over a course of a game. His are way down. It's actually last in the league. So that we talked a little bit about, where T.Y. Hilton's getting targeted, but this is for Luck as a whole, and he's just not throwing, downfield much at all. That's definitely concerning. Steve Young also mentioned that he's watched every snap of his, or every throw of his, since high school, and he's not the same guy to him, and that kind of echoes what we thought. So we're going to be rooting for Luck, and we'll see over the next couple of weeks if he can expand on this. But right now, it is a bit concerning.
Definitely. It's kind of eye-opening. Like I said, I'm not all the way off the Luck train. I'm kind of sitting at the station waiting to figure out if the train's going to keep going or not. Wheels have definitely come off. I'll be curious to see if it's still just, hey, getting back from an injury. They've just been real secretive about it, so it's always concerning when you don't know much. Like I said, we'll tweet those things out on the @EvoSportsPod Twitter handle. You can find myself at DrewFerraro88. Dave, what's your Twitter handle?
DSanders877. And the podcast itself is at Evo Sports Pod. We're also on Facebook.
Yeah, go ahead and look for us. So that's going to wrap us up here for Part 2 of Volume 3. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, leave us a note, hit us with any questions you've got. It really does help us get better. Lets us know we're on the right track for to talk about what you guys want to talk about. We're pretty big up on the social media, so make sure you find us on Facebook, Twitter, and at all of our handles there so you guys can get all the latest content from us and join us in on the discussion.